welcome back to the 1% Show. If you're new here, tune in to hear me spin the yarns with authors, savants, and eccentric humans every week. Today on the 1% Show... It almost reminds me of, I've just been going crazy recently, but there's this social convention where, you meet someone new, maybe you're at an event, and you meet 20 or 30 people on the same day. This happened at my workplace recently, and we met 20 or 30 people, trainers, coaches, co-workers, and obviously no one's going to remember 20 or 30 names of all the people they met that day. But there's this social convention that says, you sort of got to remember their name, and the next time you see them during that day, you're meant to remember their name, otherwise it's kind of weird and you can't really ask their name again because it's sort of seen as, oh, you should have remembered me type thing. And it just drives me nuts. Why can't we just go up to people and go, sorry, don't remember your name, what was it? I mean, I guess some people do, but I feel like there's a bit of
I did that
sparks around it.
Yeah, I can't remember names. I had a friend who I called Emily for about a year, and then she told me her name was actually Holly.
See?
That was quite embarrassing.
Classic Rosie.
I think manners are crap.
I'm your Aussie host, Brandon Nankivell, and it's time to kick back and enjoy the show. Let's go. This episode is brought to you by Blinkist, a pretty sweet app that gives you key insights from over 2,000 best-selling non-fiction books, transformed into powerful packs you can read or listen to in just 15 minutes. These powerful packs are known as Blinks. Some of my favourite blinks include Superintelligence, Deep Work, and The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Head to Blinkist.com/1% better to get started. That's Blinkist, Blinkist.com/1% better. 1% better is all words, lowercase, no spaces. Again, head to Blinkist.com/1% better to access key insights from over 2,000 best-selling non-fiction books straight from your phone. Yeah, Rosie, we want to know a bit about you. So could you just tell us a bit about where you're from and what you do?
At the moment, I am in the middle of absolute nowhere in Devon, and I just dropped out of university a couple of weeks ago to write full-time and to travel. I don't really know what I'm doing at the moment. I'm just taking some time to spend literally in the middle of nowhere to focus on some writing.
Yeah, okay. And how old are you again?
I'm 19.
Yeah, 19. I reckon I read that on your blog somewhere and I thought, holy moly. So you've got all this knowledge behind you and you're only 19 years old. Just imagine where you can go to from here. Incredible. So I've also noticed on the blog that you've quit smoking, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, that was about a month ago.
Yeah. And you've restricted your usage with social media, is that right?
Yeah, I'm pretty much off it now, apart from Reddit.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. So you've already done quite a lot. This is incredible. Now, did you start blogging at 13? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of her, but there was a blogger called Tavi Gevinson who was quite big back in about 2009. I was really inspired by her, so I just launched into it when I was at secondary school.
Wow. And did you have some success with that? I think I read some news websites or something picked up on it. Is that right?
Yeah, I got quite a bit of attention because I was so young. What I was doing wasn't particularly great. It was just because there was a sudden flurry of younger bloggers at that point, I think. So there were a lot of kind of bloggers to watch articles and stuff. And I did some work with some PRs and stuff. But I gave up that blog a couple of years ago, actually.
Okay, so how do you pronounce your last name?
Lazarovich.
Lazarovich, is that right?
Yeah. Most people can't pronounce.
Yeah, so it's Rosie Leverovich. I'm sorry, RosieLazarovich.com.
Yep.
To the listeners, I'll leave a link in the description of this video and podcast recording because that's where Rosie's blog currently is. So just amazing. So perhaps we'll launch into, so you're reading. So you read 200 books a year. That is fascinating. How on earth do you do it?
How do I do it? Well, for a start, I don't have much of a life. So, I don't go out. I don't watch TV. I'm pretty strict about social media. I don't actually think it's that impressive because people really overestimate how much I actually do, because pretty much all I do is read and write and learn stuff and occasionally sleep. So although it does sound like a lot, it really is kind of all I do. So, yeah.
Yeah. So considering the volume you read, most people are, I guess, doing their 9-to-5 jobs or they're studying full time, which you've now dropped out of now, which we'll get more into. That's really interesting as well. So there's a lot of people trying to find time to read. And when I saw that you're reading 200, I thought we could extract some knowledge from you. Now, even though you do spend, the majority of your time reading and writing, I think you've still got a great amount of value to share. Now, I read something else about subvocalization. Can you explain what subvocalization is and how it relates to reading more books?
So subvocalization is essentially the kind of the voice in your head when you read. So most people, when they read, will actually be saying the words in their heads. That's kind of how we're taught when we're young and we learn to read. It's often through people getting us to read it out loud, and that becomes habitual. But actually, I learned English non-standard way. It was not my first language, so I essentially learned. So my first language was Hebrew, and a lot of my time spent learning to read English, I was actually going through books, translating it word by word, and so I was learning to read myself rather than having someone get me to read it out loud. That I don't tend to subvocalize unless I'm really struggling to understand a book and I'm going through it slowly. So I only recently, when I was looking up reading techniques, realized that that's a speed reading technique, which is one that people can teach themselves. Although I didn't really have to teach myself to stop doing it, but it is possible to stop doing it if it's something you're in the habit of doing. So, yeah.
Okay, so just to clarify, your first language is Hebrew, and then you learn English afterwards? Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. Do you have any tips on subvocalization? Because I myself, and I know a lot of other readers out there, it is quite a challenge, but I mean, I guess it's a skill like anything that we can train. But do you have any tips apart from being born again and speaking another language, your first language, and then translating English? Any ideas?
I do think it is just practice. I think with just with enough practice of also learning to scan a bit more when you read. There's a technique where you focus on, I believe, the second word in at the beginning and the end of the sentence. So you just direct one eye at each of those words, and then the rest of the line is peripheral vision. So rather than moving along the line, you're seeing it as a whole. I believe that's supposed to help because it's more looking at it than actually reading.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And I've tried some of that myself. So if there's readers out there interested in trying that, there you go. Do you have any... You've got a blog post on this, so I'll link that in my channel just to let readers read through that. So what else did you have on reading these 200 books? I think you had 3 concepts. I don't know if you can remember off by heart, but I'm interested in learning more about those.
It's just kind of the first one, and probably the most important, is the actual willingness of, because you can speed up your reading, but there are freak cases of people who can read a book in 5 minutes. That's just very rare. There's a limit to how much you can speed it up. So the most important part is the actual, to sacrifice other things and to just sit down and read books. You can't get around that. The second part was access. And I've since had some people speak to me who say they live in an area where they don't have access to libraries and they really can't afford books and things. And it is an issue if that's the case. I just think the second most important part is to always have books with you. If you don't have access to a library, you can find ways around it. For example, books which are over 70 years old are usually in the public domain, so you can get PDFs of them for free. Secondhand books, I mean, Amazon do things like trade-ins. So yeah, a very important part of it obviously is actually having the books and having them with you. And I advocate always carrying a book with you, or at least a couple. You can fit in a lot of reading in just small gaps during the day, like bus journeys. I read when I'm doing cardio at the gym. Just any gap when you would normally pull out your phone or normally just be sat staring into thin air. And the third part, which, although it's the most exciting, is the least important, is specific techniques, things like not subvocalizing, kind of giving yourself a broad understanding of a book before you read it so you can comprehend it a bit faster. And yeah, so I'd say those are the three components to reading more.
Fantastic. See, that's really raw advice. I love to hear it. Pretty much sit down and read. Have access to the books at all times and read. Like, that's great. That's not gimmicky. That's just raw and real, which I love so much. So yeah, my next question would be, so how do you choose books to read? I'm interested in how you do that.
I like going off recommendations. I was recently in a charity shop and I realised I'd forgotten how to pick books without actually being able to look at reviews. What I like to do is to just think of a person I admire and then search for what their favourite books are, which is usually surprisingly easy to find out what someone's favourite books are. And then I just start working through them, and those lead me to other books I also really like small libraries where there's a limited choice, so I just work my way through the shelf, like small public libraries and things.
Okay, fantastic. And is there any consideration for topic, or is it just purely based on recommendations? And if the topic happens to be love and relationships, or it happens to be business and money, you just read it?
Pretty much, yeah. I prefer fiction, non-fiction. And I do like working through particular authors once I get started, but I'm really, really bored with the topics.
Yeah, great. I think another interesting discussion is, I heard this, I don't know, do you listen to Tim Ferriss?
Yeah, I listen to his podcast.
Okay, great. Because there was a recent episode where he was saying that he used to be a very practical reader and he thought non-fiction was basically the only way to go. He wanted practical steps to apply to his life. But he's found out recently that fiction you can actually learn a lot from. And I thought that was really interesting. So did you have a view on sort of the difference between reading non-fiction and fiction in terms of upgrading our lives? Is one better than the other?
I don't think they're kind of one is better than the other at all, particularly because the boundary between fiction and non-fiction is sort of a false one. There's a great paper by someone called Hayden White, which I think is called The Fictions of Factual Representation, which is essentially about how factual books are still in themselves fictions, because it's just turning sort of real life events into a narrative. So that's quite an interesting paper. I think you can't write a factual book without turning it into a narrative, which makes it a fiction. You can't really write a fiction book without pulling in some of your own life or some of your experiences, and that makes it kind of more factual. So I kind of feel like the boundaries are quite vague.
Okay, sure, yeah. No, really interesting angle. Love it. Okay, what else have we got on books here? This is great. So who are your favourite authors and why?
That's tough. My absolute favourite books. Oof. One of my absolute favourite books is Just Kids by Patti Smith, which is it's not so much a serious book. I just find it beautiful. I really love Thoreau and Seneca. At the moment, I'm reading Robert Greene, which I'm really enjoying. I think that's going to be one of my favourites. And also Lita by Nabokov was my favourite for quite a few years.
Okay, brilliant. So out of those, or anyone else you choose, for someone getting into reading and they're getting into this self-development stuff and they're realizing that they can, upgrade their lives, is there any particular book or particular author you suggest starting off with?
I would definitely say Seneca, because he's probably the most accessible philosopher I've ever read. And it does depend on which translation you read. But the Penguin translations are just completely modern. You wouldn't know they weren't written a couple of years ago or in the last century or so. And I think the messages in his work are just brilliant. They're so relevant. And if a book has remained popular for 2,000 years, it's got to be pretty good. So I recommend Seneca to anyone. I really think there is no one who could not benefit from reading him. Yeah.
Yeah, sure thing. And it's great what you said about the translations. I tell you what, I've been trying to read Letters from a Stoic by Seneca recently. I read On the Shortness of Life. That was a nice, quick, easy read. That was amazing. And I noticed you'd read it too on your blog. But I'm currently going through, the Letters to Seneca, whatever it was called, Letters from a Stoic. And I'm struggling. It's a really hard read. And I reckon I've got a difficult translation. So, I don't know if you know the specific, I think James king, or there was a specific translation that apparently is really easy to read. Do you know what it is off by heart?
Let me just check which one I've got, because it's on my desk.
Yeah, no rush. Go for it.
Let's see who translated it. Yeah, I've got the Penguin version, which is translated by Robin Campbell.
Okay, sure. We'll keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's a very simple. I do think the translation matters a lot. Like, it's kind of, language is quite malleable, and sort of the simpler translations are often a lot easier to read.
Yeah, there's no doubt, like, Stoicism, it's gaining a lot of popularity lately, and even this author Ryan Holiday, which I'm sure you've heard of, he's sort of consolidating Stoicism into sort of like a modern context, which is another really interesting to check out. But just talking about Stoicism right now, you wrote a blog post on, I forgot what it was called. It was A Guide to Stoicism for Neurotic Millennials. What were your biggest takeaways from Stoicism? How can we apply that to our daily lives?
Just the concept of controlling your own emotions is just so valuable. It's like it can't be understated. The idea which Marcus Aurelius particularly wrote about of any external event and being negative if you allow it to be, and of being able to revoke negative feelings. In my own life, I found that to be so powerful. It's really extraordinary how much control we actually have over our own emotions, even if we kind of feel like it's just external things which dictate them. So I think that's the key takeaway, which is kind of useful for people at this point in history.
Brilliant. Love it. Okay, cool. So, could talk forever. There's so much interesting stuff here. So just give me a minute. Let's see. Alright, I was gonna ask you so much more. What else? Yeah, so a bit more on your university story. So you dropped out recently. Can you explain how and why you started university? So what you were studying and why you were, and then what led you to eventually dropping out?
So English literature and language with a bit of French on the side. And I mean, I loved the course. I loved the content. It was really fun. It was really enjoyable. It wasn't too difficult. And everything was great. And then I got a few weeks into the term and I just kept getting the nagging feeling that it wasn't right, however much I was enjoying it. And I mean, whilst I really enjoyed what I was studying, I could see very much it didn't have a really useful real-world application. And I started to get very discouraged with it because I was kind of writing about books which were interesting and fun to read, but I got sick of just analysing other people's writing rather than doing my own. And I kind of debated it for a while. And then one day I woke up and knew I was not going to stay there anymore. I was going to kind of freeze my course so that I can return if I want within a time. But for now, I am just focusing on writing and traveling for at least the next year.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. So you woke up and you just knew that this wasn't the right thing for you.
Yeah, pretty much it.
Incredible. I can really relate to that. This podcast isn't about me, but I can just relate here. And exact same thing happened to me. I was in a lecture one day. I was 1.5 years through my 3-year course, and I've just been inspired by all the success literature, the books I've been reading, the guys on the podcast I've been listening to, James Altucher, Tim Ferriss, all these guys. And I'm sure you can relate, and I just knew it, and bam. So, I don't know.
You did the same?
What's that? Sorry, go on.
So you did the same?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Yeah, sitting in my lecture, working on the YouTube channel, and I just knew I didn't belong there. So I walked out of it, and I haven't looked back since.
Brilliant.
Yeah, no, it's good. So how do you feel now that you're out of it? Are you nervous about, maybe your potential career in the future or your financial situation? Is there any downsides, or is it all sort of bells and whistles for you now?
It's stressful. I'm lucky that I had a good amount of savings, so I should be okay for at least the next few months while I kind of sort myself out. And I mean, to be honest, the place where I was living at university was so expensive that it's actually kind of cheaper for me to travel than to rent the accommodation there. So that's an advantage, really, which means I don't have to worry too much about that side of it. So at the moment, I'm doing a TED Talk in a couple of weeks, actually. So at the moment, I'm just working on that. And I'm working on a book proposal. So, and the blog. So those are kind of my three main focuses.
How are you feeling about the TED Talk coming up?
I'm terrified. I'm so bad at public speaking.
Well, this is good
I'm glad
practice.
it's a fairly small one. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No, I don't think I can handle the big ones.
Well, that's fantastic to hear, because you've certainly got some knowledge to share. So when that TED Talk does come out, will you have a link on your blog?
Yeah, I will probably post it unless it's incredibly embarrassing. But I've got enough time left to post it.
Alright, well, I'm going to do my best effort to find it no matter what and embarrass you by sharing it with all my followers. No, that's great.
Okay.
So... yeah, all right. To add some practical value to the listeners listening right now, would you have any advice based on your experience on students that are currently studying at university, but they know they don't want to do what they're doing, and perhaps their parents are forcing them to do something that they really don't want to do, and they sort of feel stuck. Do you have any sort of advice based on your experience?
I mean, it's tough because I was only there for one semester, so I don't actually have a huge amount of experience with university. So, I mean, I would definitely say don't drop out just because it's hard. Because if you're finding university hard, then kind of work and stuff is not going to be easier. So, if you're considering dropping out because the course is difficult, maybe a better idea to look at changing courses or kind of changing your modules. I guess I would say to try and build something up on the side a bit whilst you're there, to just maybe take a bit of time if you have a blog or something you do outside of university to build on that a bit, so you've got something to fall back onto once you drop out. And do I also really recommend not just kind of going home and house or whatever straight away. Like, even if you just go and get an Airbnb somewhere. Just like I've just decided I'm not going to go home for more than, say, a week at a time. Just so it's a case of me still being moved out and still being moving on, rather than going back to how it was before university, if that makes sense. So I don't know a huge amount about it, and I've only been out of university 2 or 3 weeks now. But that's kind of what I've learned so far.
Okay, sure. And I'm sure you'll learn a lot more as you go, and we'll see that on your blog. Fantastic. Yeah. Now, another thing. So you've quit smoking. Now that I've got parents and they've been smoking and they've, tried quitting for years and, they get irritable and then they go back to it and then they try to go off again and they last a week and, it's a big problem for a lot of people worldwide. So the fact that you've pretty much quit smoking, if I'm correct, that's really impressive. So do you want to tell us a bit about...
Well, I think, I believe according to what I've read, some people are just genetically wired to get addicted to nicotine easily. And I've always been one of those people. Like most people talk about when they have their first cigarette, it's horrible and they cough. And I was not like that. I was a teenager. I had my first cigarette and I thought it was the best thing in the world. And as soon as I turned 18, I just started chain smoking like crazy. And that went on for a year. And I realized that the longer I left it, the harder it would be eventually to quit. Obviously, I wasn't worried about the dangers. I just think I got addicted to it really easily, and I won't deny that. So the main way I quit was similar to how I really quit any bad habit, which is just conditioning. Expose yourself to all the grossest information possible about how horrible it is every single day, weeks or months. You just suddenly cannot even tolerate it anymore. And I think that's probably what I did with university by reading so much about other options. But I did that with smoking. I subscribed to subreddits and stuff, and just every day just like made the grimmest images and stories and stuff. And then after, I guess about a month, I just couldn't smoke anymore. That's my main technique.
Okay, so it almost sounds like, I don't know if you've read Tony Robbins, but it almost sounds like...
Yeah, I have actually. I think I watched a video of him talking about it a couple of days ago.
And what did he say in that video?
I believe he talked about conditioning, which he used, I think, to improve his self-esteem and his public speaking. And he talked about just surrounding himself with motivational messages and tapes and things. And I believe that's part of why he's just such an incredibly inspirational person.
Yeah, that guy's an absolute tank. And yeah, I was just going to say, I think it relates to the pain and pleasure principle. That's what it sounds like. So you associate massive pain with the thing you want to give up. So in this case, it would be smoking. So you exposed yourself to subreddits where, saying all the bad things about smoking. And then on the other end of the scale, you can associate a lot of pleasure to giving up. So what are you going to get out of it? So that's almost what it sounds like, which is a great technique that I think people can use.
Yeah, no, it's pretty very useful.
Okay, fabulous. Now, was this the same story for drinking alcohol?
That was kind of just, I never had a very good relationship with it. And I was sick of getting like 3-day hangovers because I cannot hold my alcohol. So that was a lot easier to quit because the side effects of it for me were so horrendous. So actually that was something fairly easy to quit. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting how everyone reacts differently. Fantastic. What else we got here? So let's see. Yeah, now, we're sort of jumping from topic to topic. There's so many things to talk about. There's another thing. What removing my piercings with pliers taught me about change. Now, you've wrote a post on that. What on earth does this mean? I'm curious.
Yeah, that was while I was still at university and I was trying to reconcile it. And I guess that was about how I used to have a lot of piercings. Then one night I got one of my flatmates to remove them all with pliers, and it was a very, very strange experience for a while, just of my face feeling completely different. And then in the same way that you adjust to having piercings, you adjust to not having them, and they heal up. You stop like washing around where they were, things like that. Yes, I kind of use that as a metaphor for adapting to change.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, and jumping on to habits, we're all over the place. So your social media, we discussed this a bit at the start, and you've restricted sort of your usage. It says here in the post, it began with Tumblr. Oh, the pain of clicking the little button. My Tumblr blog had over 10,000 posts on it from years of adolescence. Every moment of angst, friendship, crush, and a drunken night recorded with text posts. And then next I said farewell to Facebook. So, I mean, it's crazy. People at our age, 19, I'm 21, we're young people, and a lot of us are using, Facebook. But then I think you've said here that, I don't know, I think it was 11 million people quit it in 2011 or something like that. But basically, what I'm trying to say is, how can we restrict our social media use, and why should we do so?
I mean, there are two main reasons why I quit it and why I think other people should. Number one is time. Self-reported data, the average person spends something like an hour and 20 minutes on social media a day, but then that's self-reported. The actual number is probably a lot higher, judging from myself in the past and other people I know. And that's kind of enough time, to read half a book or whatever. And the second reason is to actually preserve your ability to focus properly, because it's well documented that social media erodes our focus, our ability to concentrate on work. And while social media is a skill that anyone can pick up, there are really young kids able to run social media accounts. So whilst that's a skill that's easy to replicate, there are companies that have algorithms that tweet for them. Doing the actual hard work, which requires focus, is not something that you can replicate with a machine so easily. And I guess I kind of wanted to preserve that. I wanted to preserve that capacity for myself because I was quite scared when I saw how my focus was just not at its previous level after a few years on social media. So yeah, those are two main reasons why I quit and why I think a lot more people really need to.
Yeah, okay. And I think I read somewhere that you sort of got this inspiration from a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport. Could you tell us a bit about that book and what you learned?
That's a fantastic book, which I'm constantly giving to people and getting people to read, which is essentially about the value of working in a focused way and how it's a rare skill. It's not a skill that can be replicated, and really it's quite hard to distill the book, but that's the main thesis behind it. And Cal Newport talks a lot about all the ways in which you can preserve your focus, and the main one of them is getting used to boredom, getting used to remaining on a single task for long periods of time, and just not resorting to constant stimulation through things like Twitter. So yeah, kind of valuable. I guess a valuable way of improving your focus is to just not constantly jump on your phone or jump on a game or whatever when you're bored, to just sit with it or to do something which requires a bit more effort, like reading. Yeah.
Okay. I found another thing here. 4 Sigma mushroom coffee I got down in my notes. Is that something you consume?
Yeah, I believe I was looking up some kind of mushroom supplement on Amazon, and I found that it's a coffee that contains very little caffeine, but it also contains certain wild mushrooms. It's quite expensive, but I use sort of only a tiny amount of it, and it has a really, really noticeable effect on your focus, your general ability to work, and I think it's pretty brilliant. So yeah, I think that's great.
Okay, and is this sort of part of a repertoire of smart drugs or nootropics? Have you experimented in this scene much for cognitive enhancement?
I've been playing around a bit with it lately, just different teas and coffees and things. I'm a bit obsessed with tea. I just bought tea that I can't remember the exact name, but it actually translates to dark shit tea. And I walked into a really posh tea shop in London where the teas were something like £200 a kilo, and I asked for dark shit tea. So I've just bought some of that, and that's also supposed to have an impact on your focus. I don't know how much of it's placebo or whatever, but if it works, really.
Yeah, that's right. You never know with this sort of stuff. I mean, even if it is a placebo, then, why not? You've got yourself a focus boost. Looking at the bigger picture, now that we're on focus, do you have any diets or healthy eating habits or any, foods you eat to keep your energy going or keep your focus uptight?
I've kind of made a big pivot in my diet lately. I was raw vegan for a long time, and kind of basically lived on bananas. And then I've recently switched actually to eating fish, which kind of makes me feel a bit guilty. But I have found it's had a good impact on my health. So I don't eat meat or dairy, and I avoid gluten because of allergies. So I focus on, at the moment, kind of fish, beans, vegetables. I guess I keep things very, very simple, partly because of traveling and stuff. It's kind of complicated to have a lot of ingredients or whatever. I don't know if that affects my focus, but I just like to pay close attention to what just makes me feel good, basically. Yeah.
Sure thing. Yeah, interesting. You mentioned things like, gluten, and there's books on how, even wheat, and there's a whole bunch of things. But I'm really interested in your motivation behind, obviously, veganism. It's growing in popularity a lot lately. There's a bit of controversy around it, but it's incredibly interesting. No doubt about it. So what got you into being a raw vegan? What's your view on that? What got you to be a raw vegan, and what's your motivation behind it?
That was ethical, really. And I think I did that for about 6 months. So, I guess it was ethically motivated, and that meant I wasn't paying so much attention to the health side of it. And I mean, the evidence is conflicting. I can't make a judgment, but I kind of recently decided to sort of move away from it a bit, because I can always go back to veganism, but I guess I just wanted to go for a small amount of animal products, and to choose the ones which are sort of the most nutritionally dense, and just kind of keep them to a minimal level. So I think veganism is amazing. I'm completely behind anyone who does it. I'm just personally taking a bit of a break from it, and I might go back in the future.
Okay, yeah, sure thing. No, really interesting stuff. I've got a few books on the reading list for the book club, and we're going to read a bit on plant-based diets and veganism, so we'll see where I end up. But yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. Super interesting stuff. Now, we'll probably speak for another 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm going to go off and spend some quality time with my girlfriend, which would be nice.
Okay.
But we've gone through, alright, so university, Stoicism, 4 Sigma. I'm sure this could just keep going on and on and on from what I've seen on your blog. All right, so perhaps we'll go. Let's see. All right, we'll go Tim Ferriss style on you. I pretty much copied his template of questions that he asked to every guest on the podcast. So I'll hit you up with a few. So what we've got here is... You ready?
Yep.
Okay, great. When you think of the word successful, who's the first person who comes to mind and why?
I guess I would have to say people like Seneca, whose legacy has lasted just an insane amount of time, like 20 times their lifetime or something. I guess those are the people who would come to mind.
Great. What is something you believe that other people think is insane?
I think manners are crap. I guess, from living in England, I've just seen that a lot of the kind of social norms surrounding manners here is just insane. Like,
could you elaborate on that? Kind of, like a specific example?
I think a lot of it's just patronising. Like when people say, like, "Oh, do you mind terribly if I open the window?" And it's just like, well, I'm an adult. If I mind, I would tell you. You don't need to ask. And just like apologising if you bump someone slightly when it's not like you've broken their bone. I just think it wastes a lot of time and energy. And I've seen so many British people like apologise to table legs that they walk into or whatever. It's a waste of time and energy, and it's possible to be a decent person without just throwing pleases and thank yous around non-stop. But I imagine a lot of people would disagree with that.
Yeah, I love the way your mind works. It almost reminds me of, I've just been going crazy recently, but there's this social convention where, you meet someone new, maybe you're at an event and you meet 20 or 30 people on the same day. This happened at my workplace recently, and, we met 20 or 30 people, trainers, coaches, co-workers, and obviously no one's going to remember 20 or 30 names of all the people they met that day. But there's this social convention that says, you sort of got to remember their name, and the next time you see them during that day, you're meant to remember their name. Otherwise, it's kind of weird, and you can't really ask their name again because it's sort of seen as, oh, you should have remembered me type thing. And it just drives me nuts. Why can't we just go up to people and go, sorry, don't remember your name. What was it? I mean, I guess some people do, but I feel like there's a bit of
I did that
sparks around it.
Yeah, I can't remember names. I had a friend who I called Emily for about a year, and then she told me her name was actually Holly.
See?
That was quite
absolute classic Rosie. My gosh. Yeah, why does it have to be this guilty shame around forgetting names? Like, I try my best to remember names, like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Have you read that?
No, I haven't actually. That's kind of on the list.
Okay, that's interesting. But yeah, when you come to that, that's a really popular book, and one of the lessons is, names are the sweetest sound in the English language. Everyone loves to hear their name. But anyway, we could speak a whole podcast on social conventions. That would be a really interesting one, Rosie. We could talk about that for an hour. But anyway, we're going to move on. Thank you for sharing your view on that. That was great. I'm going to get too fired up and take over the whole conversation here. So, next one. What is we've been through that. What is your favourite documentary or movie?
My favourite movie of all time is called Harold and Maude, which is a 70s. It is on Netflix if people haven't seen it. It's just beautiful. Cat Stevens did the soundtrack, and it's heartbreaking, and I can't watch it more than once a year because it makes me cry so much. For documentaries, I really like I believe it's called I'm Not Your Guru with Tony Robbins. That's fantastic. It's really moving, and that was kind of my introduction to Tony Robbins, and it just makes you completely fall in love with him within the first 2 minutes or so. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, we could do a podcast on that too. That was really interesting. Do you remember that bit where he pulled someone out of the audience and basically got this girl to break up with her boyfriend live in front of everyone over the phone on the whim of the moment? How did you react to that?
Yeah, that was really shocking. I did agree with, I believe he said that if she was debating it, she should just do it, to be honest. But then I think she went back to him that night, if I remember correctly. So yeah, that bit was quite extreme, but I think he was fairly justified considering the way she was talking about the relationship.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I think I saw in the credits that it said they got back together. And that's just the thing I had. I was like, I look up to Tony Robbins. He's an incredibly smart guy. But I'm thinking if he's stood up this girl and got her to break up and then they've got back together, has Tony really done the right thing? But I don't know. That's a whole nother episode. But that was incredible. He's a really straight up guy, and if something doesn't feel right in your heart, then let it go. But anyway, we'll move on to the next one. That's great. What purchase of $100 or less has most positively impacted your life in the last 6 months?
I would say probably my Lamy fountain pen, because having a good pen is just so important. They are really robust pens. I've had them for more than 6 months, but I bought a new one recently because I lost my old one, which made me cry. So that's kind of a £20 pen, but it's just so worth it. If you don't lose them, then they will last years, and they make your handwriting so much nicer. I'd say that.
Fantastic. Now, we cannot underrate the value of a good, soft, smooth-flowing pen. Like, we use pens all the time. Why not make that little investment into just an amazing pen? So, can I take the name of that one more time? I want to write it down.
That's Lamy, which is Lamy.
Yep.
And they are the best fountain pens I've ever used.
Lamy fountain pen. Listen to that, viewers. Get it yourself a Lamy fountain pen. That's great. All right. I'm just getting more excited as we go along. I'm going to keep you up all night. So the next one, I'm standing on my chair right now. What are your morning rituals, and what do the first 60 minutes of your day look like, Rosie?
So I'm pretty rigid with it at the moment, which is great because where I am, I have no commitments to anyone else, so I can always have my morning how I like. So if I can, I get up at 6. Otherwise, I wake up at 8:30. For some reason, I either wake up at 6 or 8:30 on the dot, which is really weird. And then I will go make coffee and make some breakfast whilst listening to a podcast. I usually like to listen to Let's Know Things in the morning. Then I go back upstairs, I meditate for 10 minutes, and then I get straight into writing and just... and before that, I'll set 3 main priorities for the day. Yeah. And then I just get straight into writing, and I aim to write 1,000 words in about an hour. After that, I do languages, and that's pretty much my morning every day at the moment.
Great. Yeah, the 2 things I'd like to highlight there is, number 1, meditation. That's great to see. That's becoming a really big thing these days. People have been doing it for years, but only now is it getting the attention it deserves. So that's great. And I think 80% of Tim Ferriss podcast guests, of all the success people, had a meditation habit. So really interesting that we've got another one here from you. And what was the second thing you said? You listen to a podcast while having your morning coffee. Is that right?
So let's look at which of my favourite ones. So my current favourite is probably Let's Know Things with Colin Wright. I also, I listen to a lot, but that's kind of my current favourite. And I also really like the School of Greatness with Lewis House, because it's just, the guests on that are fantastic. There's also Optimal Living Daily, which is just a short episode, which is quite nice to start the day with. Yeah, so I just like listening to those in the morning.
Fantastic. Thanks for the suggestions. And that is a fantastic way to make use of your time on planet Earth. Like, instead of just having a coffee, you can listen to a podcast and educate yourself. I love it. That's great. So, moving on to the next one. What obsessions do you explore on the evenings or weekends?
Well, at the moment, my life is basically all weekend, which is great. So I do languages. I'm currently doing French, German, Danish, and I am relearning Hebrew because I forgot it. So I'm having to relearn the Hebrew alphabet. That's kind of my current I guess. I'd say that's kind of it. There's also my photography, which is on the sideline, and that I don't get to do as much of these days. But I kind of, in my spare time, I like to just go and take pictures.
Okay.
But yeah, my life is reading books and writing predominantly.
Great. Yeah, so you got books, reading, writing, languages, photography, a whole lot of things. Fantastic. We're just going to rewind a bit. So I thought it was quite amusing. So you've forgot your first language, you've forgot Hebrew, and you've had to relearn it. How does that happen?
I guess I just spent so much time in England, and then when I go back to Israel, everyone speaks English to me because they want to practice their English. So I just kind of forgot the alphabet. I'm having to relearn it, which is a real pain, but it should go a bit faster because I used to know it.
All right, so Rosie, I really appreciate your time right now. This is great. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'll probably have my girlfriend knocking on my door. So yeah, 4 more. What topic would you speak about if you are... Oh, isn't that funny? Because you're doing a TED Talk. So the question is, what topic would you speak about if you were asked to give a TED Talk on something outside of your main area of expertise?
Well, I'm going to be doing it on failure, funnily enough. I guess if I was doing another one, I guess if I was doing a second TED Talk, I would like to talk about art because that's something I would like to talking about, but it's kind of not my main focus. I really like weird 1600s to 1800s Italian religious art where like everything's just the perspectives are so weird and like all the people are just like really weirdly shaped and stuff. I really love just weird old art. I guess that would be another topic I'd like to do a talk on.
Great. Just on that, there's a bit of discussion lately. It's 2017, and it's basically the whole narrative of the artist that loves art, is super passionate about it. They're very talented, but when it comes to making money from it, people are, questioning is this something you can really pursue and make it a good financial investment? And there's also another one where is art actually... How do I articulate myself? Is art contributing to the world? Is it necessary compared to something like other fields such as engineering, for example? Do you have any views on that?
I actually got someone criticizing me recently saying that writing isn't being productive and valuable, things like that. But funnily enough, I'm actually working on something about this at the moment. That society as a whole, in terms of industries and culture, it's just a web. It's like an ecosystem, and you remove anything from an ecosystem and the whole thing will collapse, however insignificant it looks to you. And you just can't deny that art is a part of our world as a whole. It's part of the ecosystem, and whether you see it as the oak tree or the caterpillar, kind of the big thing or the small thing to you, it's just, you just cannot deny that if you remove it, it will have their impact than it might seem. So yeah, I do think art is very valuable at this point in history, both art that people are creating and art from the past. And of artists making money, I guess. I have seen the kind of struggles with that in artists in my own family, and that I know. I'm really encouraged by the recent emergence of Patreon, because the Patreon model goes back to, I believe, the ancient Greeks and Romans, where a wealthy person would support an artist. I guess I'm just really encouraged by that, and the way that artists are able to support themselves in just so many different ways online, from kind of selling their art even to things like Patreon, where people believe in them and support their work.
Yeah, great that you mention it. I mean, it's 2017. There's so many online tools popping up that people can use. I mean, there's artists on a site called Fiverr.com where people can pay you $5, goes up to $20, $30, and you can do vector graphics for people. And, there's Patreon where it's purely based on people believing in what you can do. I mean, there's so many ways, isn't there? No, that's great. So we'll move on to the next one. What is the best or most worthwhile investment you've made? Now, this could be an investment of money, time, energy, or any other resource.
I would say perhaps the best investment of energy I've made was when I kind of threw out all my stuff about a year ago. That was a great choice. It took a lot of time because I was a terrible hoarder, but now I can pretty much carry everything I own, and that was just a brilliant choice. As for money, I always say books. I spend pretty much everything on books, and I've pretty much never regretted it. But I usually regret spending money on technology or clothes or whatever. So yeah, best money investment you can make, really.
Yeah, incredible. I like it. Okay, so coming close to the end here, do you have a quote you live your life by or think of often?
I have a few. Let me just pick one. Got a whole notebook of them. There are a lot. Trying to pick one. There's one I like from, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Sun Tzu, who was a Chinese military commander. which is opportunities multiply as they are seized. And in the same text, he also wrote, let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. And I also like one from, again, I'm really going to butcher his name, but I think it's Machiavelli, which is make mistakes of ambition and not mistakes of sloth. Those are two I really like. I also, every morning and night, I read over an article which was on The Guardian a few years ago, which was trying, written by a palliative Kenner, about the 5 things that she hears patients say as they're dying most often. That's just so powerful. That's kind of, I guess, those are 3 things I really live my life by.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing. So, to the listeners out there, now that this podcast is coming to an end, I call it more of a casual discussion. This is what it is. Where can we find you? Whether you have some social media, perhaps if you want to repeat the blog, and where can we find you?
My blog is the main place, rosielasrovich.com. If you search my name on Medium or Quora, I also have accounts on there. And Reddit, really. You can directly ask me stuff on Quora if you want. I have a Medium account, but I publish the same stuff on there as I do in my blog. So if you follow one, no need to really follow the other. That's pretty much it at the moment. And you can always email me via my blog, rosielasrovich7@gmail.com, and I usually reply eventually.
All right, cool bananas. So, I'll make my best effort to include these links in the description of wherever this interview goes, probably on SoundCloud. This is really unofficial at the moment. I'm sort of gathering up a few podcasts before I launch. In the YouTube description, the SoundCloud description, wherever this is, I'll leave links to your stuff below so listeners can access it. That's great. I want to thank you again, Rosie, for coming on. I really appreciate your time. This has been a blast, and I basically want to wish you luck with your TED Talk.
Thank you very much. It's been really fun.
If you'd like 3 gold nuggets from the book I'm currently reading, packed into a short, entertaining weekly email, then head to brandonnankivell.com/subscribe. This is also the best way to interact with me and keep up with what I'm doing. Again, head to brandonnankivell.com/subscribe. As usual, thank you for listening, my friends. I release new episodes every week. Make sure you don't miss one by subscribing. It's super easy and means a lot to me. Go to iTunes, search for The 1% Show, and click subscribe. Once again, I'm your host, Brandon Nankivell, and I'll see you in the next episode.